forms a mental universe of perpetual self-actuation and puts a wedge between you and the sentient reality around you. Thus, it took almost 3 to 4 days after our arrival in Lome before we realized for the first time that whatever their version of NEPA is the National Electric Power Authority, the national electricity producer in Nigeria. So it took us 4 days to realize that whatever their version of NEPA was hadn't taken light since we arrived. To take light in Nigerian English, I don't know how to explain that. It means power cuts, power failures, and all that. And we tend to have those very frequently, several times during the day in Nigeria. So conditioned were we by the habit of underdevelopment that we just settled in the Villa d'Accueil, University Guest House in downtown Lome, and lived the reality of Nigeria's constant power failures in our heads, totally oblivious to the reality on the ground. I believe it was Tunde Ajibade, our class rep, who first noticed the alarming oddity of constant and uninterrupted electricity. But the rest of us mocked him and commented on his endless capacity to come up with outlandish stories. Whoever heard of a strange beast called regular electricity? What's he talking about? Citizens of the giant of Africa were encountering a certain aspect of development for the first time in their lives, and their cognitive capacities just couldn't handle it. They were prisoners of the habit of underdevelopment. By the end of our first week, we had to accept the fact that constant electricity was taken for granted in Togo. This affected our socialization into development. The authorities of the University du Benin, now University de Lome, had moved us into students' hostels on campus. We were beginning to make Togolese friends, exploring the whole range of undergraduate life with them in spaces of intellection and socialization on and off campus. That meant we had vocabularies of underdevelopment for which we had to find equivalents in French to carry the weight of our Nigerian world. Consider the expression for the idea of power interruption in French, panne d'électricité. If you tried to explain the idea of the Nigerian power failure to your new Togolese friend, and you said panne d'électricité, what came up in his mind was either a bulb suddenly snapping out of life, and you replaced it, or the extremely unusual situation of a mechanical fault in some central power station, and you would have been warned weeks ahead of the scheduled maintenance shutdown. That's what panne d'électricité covered in the semantic world of the Togolese. So we explained and explained and explained the Nigerian version of things. The frown on the faces of our Togolese friends, a testament to their inability to grasp our Nigerian version of underdevelopment. One other feature of the habit of underdevelopment is that your vocabulary is always superfluous because you need more words to carry the weight of experiences unknown to civilized humanity. For an entire year in Togo, we had a baggage of redundant words and expressions. Half current, rationing, lanterns, and the rest. The move from underdevelopment to development also meant that we had to cope with translocations in meaning. Take something as simple as candles. Apart from the spiritual value of candles in Aladura churches, these Africanized churches, white garment churches in Nigeria, they are first and foremost part of the instrumental world of power failure. In Togo, we had to transfer candles to the exclusive context of Catholic church rituals and candlelit dinners. You did not stock up on candles because you expected the electricity company to take it. It also took some time before we noticed the constant power supply. The day we moved to the university residence, one of us had immediately gone to the Grand Marché, Lobez Central Market, to buy 2 plastic jerry cans for water storage. When he came back, the rest of us scolded him for not reminding us of that vital necessity, and we rushed to the market to buy plastic jerry cans for water storage. And if you know what that means, if you're coming from a place where you get water in the taps maybe once or twice a week, you have to buy storage material, and you load up and all that. Well, we spent an entire year in Lomé, and hot and cold water never stopped gushing out of the taps. Our Togolese friends on campus laughed heartily when we told them why we had bought those containers. Such was the gap in basic public service delivery between Togo and Nigeria that we had to shed the last thread of our illusion of being the giant of Africa by the end of our first month of our one-year sojourn. At the end of our program, we returned home as humbled emissaries of the rest of Africa to our compatriots. We returned to a country where folks who had never stepped out of their spheres of underdevelopment were too gone in the socialization that had them speak about those small African countries in beer parlor banter. Never mind that they could be drinking beer chilled with ice block, the table littered with candles and kerosene lanterns because the beer parlor had not had light in the fridge. And we would try to tell them that the people they were talking about in those small African countries were maybe beyond power and water failure. And they would dismiss us in that Nigerian spirit of never tolerating the idea of being second to any country in Africa. That is what makes Nigeria tick. Even the palm wine drinker in Lagos feels superior to the drinker of Merlot in Johannesburg. Just when you are about to start thinking that the phenomenon that I have mapped out thus far as the habit of underdevelopment carries a Nigerian passport, you see it pursuing its inexorable course all over the continent. The habit of underdevelopment is a citizen of every African country. I have only given the lion's share to Nigeria in furtherance of our belief that we are Africa. And like I told you, I'm wearing my bulletproof vest because the South Africans are Now, we all know that no specialist, I'm talking about academics here, Africanists, of Africa can claim to know his or her onions if they haven't taken public transportation in any of the capitals of sub-Saharan Africa. The public bus, do I have this? The public bus, we call them Molwes in Lagos. That's a Molwe there. Or the smaller ones, we call them the Danfos. The Molwes in Lagos or the Matatus in Nairobi, they call them taxis in Johannesburg. And they have all these the most complicated hand signals. It's an intricate network of sign language to hail a taxi in Johannesburg. The public bus is an invaluable window into the soul of the country. From political commentary to countercultural or subcultural ways of seeing and being, the public bus is the place to feel the pulse of Africa. That is why writers like Ngugi wa Thiong'o often place some of their most trenchant critiques of the post-colonial African condition in public bus punditry and narratives. Alas, the public bus is also the locus of a particularly striking aspect of the habit of underdevelopment that I have observed in virtually every Francophone African country that I have visited in sub-Saharan Africa, and that's practically all of them. I don't think less. For want of a tidier expression,